Welcome to the Scale Up Show, everybody. This is your host, Ryan Staley, and I have a very special guest today. I have Jordan Wilson. Jordan is a fellow Chicagoan, is also the founder and host of Everyday AI, which is a media and consulting company helping people through generative AI with the daily live stream podcast, as well as a daily newsletter. Jordan, welcome. Happy having you on the show, man. Again.
Ryan, back for round two. Can't wait.
So today, part two, we're going over agents and tools. So you're going to have like the tool hoarders, the prompt hoarders, all those people that collect information at scale. Sometimes I have a little of that sickness myself. But we're going to go over through some of that today. So last episode, if you did not check it out, we went through the biggest mistakes that companies make with LLMs. We also went through, some of the areas of where this is evolving, how it's evolving, and some of the biggest opportunities as well. And the downside if you're sitting on the sidelines in terms of implementing this, because it can be catastrophic for you. So let's talk about agents and tools, Jordan. So I know we were talking a little bit on the break about just different tools you leverage and areas along those lines. So let's kick it off on the tool side. I mean, man, what's your favorite stack of tools? And then how do you integrate them specifically?
Oh man, at the end of the day, I'm kind of vanilla in terms of the tools that I use on a consistent basis. I'm a huge Chat GPT fan. I have been and been a fan of the GPT technology for a very long time. So I would say that still Chat GPT is the most used tool. Another one I use as someone that does a lot of podcasting, similar to yourself, right? I love a tool called Cast Magic. So think of, maybe you use like an Otter AI, or maybe you use Zoom AI's assistant, to record and transcribe your meetings. I actually have a separate tool for that I use called MeetGeek. But, I think that this Cast Magic tool is a great way. So it uses OpenAI's Whisper transcription to transcribe, voice to text. But the thing I love about Cast Magic, and why I always tell people oh, you should check it out, is you can save, as an example, we have 50 custom prompts, maybe not 50, maybe 40 something custom prompts. And all we do is we upload that piece of audio once, and then within 30 seconds, it's already run through those 40 plus prompts all at once. So, I think it's great, using a tool, something like that for meetings, right? If you have this routine follow-up that you always need to automate, then, there's other tools that I really like to use that, maybe aren't AI at their base, but then they have, AI integrations. We were kind of chatting. Another one I use a lot is Hexamatic, which is kind of an automation or a scraping tool, but then it has, connections to all the large language models like ChatGPT, Gemini from Google. So man, I've been unfortunately, like a software collector for 12 years. I've actually have active subscriptions to, 500 some tools. So I could talk about AI and tools all day, but I'm pretty sure we don't want this to turn into a 3-hour podcast.
No, we don't. It's interesting you mentioned Cast Magic, because that's the tool I use as well. So I almost think and dude, maybe we do this as an episode or something sometime where we do a joint live stream and I pull up my Cast Magic, you pull up yours, we go through the different prompts. I think I'd love to do that with you anyways, man, and compare side by side, because I probably have 40 in there as well, same kind of thing, right? Where there's a lot, but I'm sure there's new things I could learn as well. So what's your favorite kind of use case within Cast Magic in terms of content creation, or top 3, I should say?
Gosh, I have a very specific one that's going to sound maybe funny, or it might make me sound extremely forgetful. So, kind of what I do at Everyday AI, Ryan, when you were on the show, right? So we'll do the show, we'll wrap up. And then a lot of times, afterwards, I'll chat with a guest for maybe 5, 10, 15 minutes. And then I might go record a tutorial video. And then I might have an urgent email or another meeting. And then ultimately what I do every single day is a human, former writer, I actually write the kind of podcast recap that we put in our newsletter every day. I write it by hand, right? Which is kind of funny considering there's so many tools that do this very well. But I still like to write. It's a joy, and I don't want to erase that joy. However, that's one that I use Cast Magic for all the time, because this might sound crazy, but I interview people every single day, and I always have. I think because I use AI and automation very heavily, I'm able to accomplish a lot. And I don't say that in a way of like, oh, look at me. It's just like, no, I'm just my productivity's through the roof. But what that means is, even if it was just 2 hours ago, right? So, oh, Ryan, me and you wrapped up after our show. If it's 2 hours ago, I remember very little of that. So I'm sitting down needing to, type up a recap of this podcast that I'm going to send out to, 11,000 people. And it's just like, man, what did me and Ryan talk about? So that's why I love having some of these custom prompts inside of Cast Magic as an example, because there's certain things that I always write about in the newsletter that kind of recaps the conversation. So yeah, I just ask it in a very specific way to pull out key insights that are specific to our audience. So not only is it going to, pull those insights out, but it's also going to kind of tailor it a little bit to our audience. And then I just look at those and then I type them myself. I usually ask for like 11 and then we end up writing about 3. So I just kind of read through those and I'm like, oh yeah, that's what we talked about. So that's just one kind of specific way that, I use Cast Magic.
Interesting, man. Yeah, I've experimented in a couple ways, and I'm starting to stack tools in that regards. But one of the ones that I found actually really useful for YouTube Shorts are integrating the keywords from Cast Magic into YouTube Shorts, and it does a really good job of that. I don't know why exactly, but it does a really good job on the keyword side. I don't know if you've seen the same thing at all on that with YouTube, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's another one that we use. So we have, I think there's a default prompt inside Cast Magic that does something like that. We built our own prompt that does the same thing. I think it does pretty well. But then also like the AI, everything's AI, right? But the AI video program that we use, I think it's video.ai.
Yeah, I use the same
It
one.
has,
Yeah.
yeah, it has similar features, I believe. So, I don't always know what we use. Shout out Brandon. He, my colleague is usually doing all that behind the scenes. But yeah, between Cast Magic and all these other AI, tools that do great with transcription and pulling out key points from interviews or meetings, I think they do a very good job at that.
Yeah, it's true. It's one of the things that I absolutely love. I mean, like, the other thing that I'm seeing is I'm starting to get kind of obsessed with strategic byproducts. So, obviously there's the speaking, the web training, even training you for companies and being able to create byproducts of that content wise, or other areas. The one other one too is like with sales call transcriptions. I like the ability you can create. And it was funny, I heard about this from the guys on Marketing Against the Grain about turning that into like a customer Grammarly. And so
Mhm.
basically what it is it's like you're taking all the sales call conversations and then identifying like the key phrases and themes that your customers are using. So you can translate that into copy, sales scripts, covering objections, all those areas in the language of the customer, right? Any good strategic byproducts you're seeing outside of like Cast Magic or with clients you're working with along the same lines?
Yeah, like I think in the same way that you can do those things in Cast Magic, I think a lot of people, what they're doing as the technology just becomes more powerful is they're creating just little, very specific use case for GPTs that do that same thing, right? That's actually something, I'm actually building that right now. I always like to run things like side by side, right? Like even now, like Ryan, as I'm talking to you, I was working on something. I have a Chat GPT and a Perplexity window side by side. So I like building duplicates of things because, sometimes like yesterday, right? Like Chat GPT was down for hours and so were other tools. So yes, like using something like something like Cast Magic is great for that. But one thing I've seen people successfully do, and one thing I'm starting to do as well, is take some of those custom prompts in Cast Magic that we get a lot of use out of and tweak them a little bit and build them out as just small GPTs. So I think when GPTs first came out, at ChatGPT back in November, people were looking like big picture. right? And they're like, oh, let me create one GPT that can do, 30% of my work. But it's like, all right, well, if you do it like that, it's going to create it at like an F level, right? So like one thing I'm, and our team is going to be working through now is like, okay, instead, let's create, 10 micro GPTs that do the smallest little task, but they do it very, very well, right?
Yeah.
So it's this balance of productivity and saving time with quality and kind of this granular control. So yeah, I don't even know if that answered the original question or if I just accidentally went on a rant. But
No, I think
that's
that's
one
perfect,
way.
man. I mean, it's so true because that's one of the biggest mistakes folks would make with GPTs. They're like, well, can't I just upload all my customer or all my company data in and be a centralized encyclopedia for everything and do this? And I'm like, that's too much for it, right? The way it's designed right now, it's got to be that narrow task that's specific, and then it can be exceptionally well. If you try and use it as a cover-all card, it's not going to work out. So that kind of takes me to the next phase, man. And I don't know what your take on this is, but GPT-5 is getting trained right now. There's a lot of licensing deals that OpenAI is doing with like The Atlantic. I saw Vox Media, and I think many other companies as well. So they're putting that money in, obviously, to get. I think it was Reddit. Did they do one with Reddit, or was that Google only as well?
They both did actually.
Okay, they both did it. So Reddit's whoring out their information right now. Sorry, Reddit, if I put a besmirched your good name or anything like that, but basically that's out there. So it's kind of the same thing with like GPTs as agents, I think, and why agents haven't had a successful take is because people try to use it too broad for too many different capabilities, right? What's your take on the future of agents, especially with GPT-5 probably coming out later this year, as well as what you've seen with different agents and agent tools?
Yeah, I mean, you can't you can't ignore agents. I'll actually say I think that and maybe it's just the dorks among us, but I'd say about a year ago, everyone was rushing in talking about agents when I think it was too early. I think the cost of compute was too high for even like indie developers to be able to make good tools. So I think there was a lot of hype around agents like a year ago, and you can see they didn't really take off. But it was a lot of just smaller companies but I mean, look what's happened in the last 4 months. Every single $1 trillion tech company that's building AI is now talking about publicly for the first time releasing their own agents, right? So we had Microsoft at their build conference now about 4 weeks ago. They talked about Copilot agents. Google at their IO developer conference a few weeks ago talked about Project Astra. Even the GPT 4o, they didn't give it a name, but, people are calling it her, or, I call it live Omni, right? So the ability for the model to literally see what you're working on. I think that all the, Meta as well, right? Meta just slipped in there when they released Llama 3, like, oh yeah, this is going to be available for agents. NVIDIA obviously as well. They're agents, right? Especially since the GTC conference in March. But now every single big company, so the $1 trillion companies that are building the future of work, their sites are set on agents, right? So, I mean, partially, right? Partially it's the compute, the GPU chips, depending on the company. But aside from that, everyone's focused on agents because I think the general business community has finally come around. It just took way too long to the power of generative AI. And, it took companies forever, but everyone's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see how this is useful, right? And so what this has meant is, some companies that have been very successful at implementing generative AI, a lot of their more skilled workers have turned into just generative AI or large language model button pushers. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I
Mm-hmm.
think that that's unfortunately the future of work, right? So let's say before you were, I don't know, like an art director, right? Well, now you're going to be a director of AI agents, right? And these agents are going to, use multiple tools across multiple platforms and perform different knowledge base and creative tasks at your request, and you will direct them. But I don't see any other way that plays out if I'm being honest, because every single big company in the world is sprinting toward agents because they see that's kind of the next gold mine, right? We saw with Nvidia going bonkers the last couple of days, even with their stock and their market cap, it's literally never been done what they've done in the last 5 weeks. Never been done in the history of the world, a company gaining that much market cap in that short of a time. But I think people are finally catching up to Nvidia's forward vision, and Nvidia has been pushing agents and pushing compute for this long. So yeah, whether you understand it, whether you agree with it, or whether you like it, it doesn't matter. That will be the future of work, or the future of companies that are successful in the next phase of work is those that are using and properly implementing agents, just like big successes over the last 18 months have come from the companies that are properly using large language models.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's funny, as you were talking, and we talked about, you mentioned GPUs, which obviously powers the models. What's your thoughts on, barriers to agents really taking off? And like, first things that come to mind are GPU availability, energy, right? Because the massive amount of energy that's required to fuel those. And then, it's funny, I had another guest on, I don't know, this was about 5 months ago, and he was a podcast host as well. His name was Jordan as well. And he highlighted like agents are available right now at OpenAI, but he's like, someone on the product team mentioned to him that like it would melt down the internet if they use them right now, because it's not, the infrastructure is not there. So what's your take on that? And like anything else you're hearing that's preventing this from being successful as fast as we're going right now?
Yeah, well. Now, geez, Ryan, I gotta meet this other Jordan podcast host who's interested in AI. I'm like, is this a clone of myself? Yeah. So I guess it's no secret around OpenAI and ChatGPT and Sam Altman and what they're working on. We've heard and we've read about their multi-agent systems. We've read and heard reports about Sam Altman reportedly trying to raise $7 trillion for compute. But I do think, like, okay, there's a couple ways to look at this. Why hasn't it happened yet? I don't think businesses were ready, right? And I think the big companies building models and building agents, the big companies know that, right? If the adoption rate is 20% for large language models, what do you think the adoption rate is going to be for agents? It's going to be much lower, right? So I think it's actually going to hit this sweet spot. Price of compute is coming down, right? I know I keep talking about NVIDIA. I'm a big fan, right? But you saw their Blackwell chip announced in March, and then you just saw their next generation chip, Rubin, announced 3 months later, and they're going to a yearly cycle. And all these other, all their competitors, Intel, AMD, Qualcomm, all these big, GPU graphics makers, whatever you want to call them, are making more energy efficient, more powerful chips. They're still very far behind NVIDIA, but still, the cost of compute is going down. The amount of energy needed is going down. Training costs are going down. Inference, right? So all of these things are happening at the same time. And I do think, I'm not one to make predictions, but Ryan, if you have me on your show in June 2025, I think we're having similar conversations that we've had about large language models and all these AI tools with companies that are implementing agents and those that are not. Because I do, I think a lot of people said, maybe in 4 or 5 years. I don't see that. You can't stop these large companies because when they talk about agents and they talk about compute and their stock goes bonkers and they make $1 trillion in market cap in 5 weeks, guess what they're going to double down on? Compute and agents, right? So there's no way around it, I don't think.
No, excellent, man. I think that's a good stopping point too. We gleaned the cube in terms of the topics covered, from large language models and tools to agents, man. So we are up on time. Where can people find you? Where can people learn more about you? And then we'll wrap it up, man.
Awesome. Yeah. Every day we do this. Yeah. So you can join us, LinkedIn, YouTube, join the live stream, Everyday AI, or you can go to youreverydayai.com. Yeah. We do the newsletter and the podcast every single day. You can listen on Spotify and Apple and all the other places. So when you're done listening to Ryan's great show, if you still have time and energy, come check us out there.
Well, thanks for being on again. And thank you for joining us as well. And we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks, Ryan.